A psalmist once wrote, "Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast." If I were to ask you where you encounter or experience God, like the psalmist, images of God in the breaking dawn or the vast ocean side might come to mind. Or you might tell me that you experience God each week in the smiles and hugs of the people of your family of faith. Or you might feel God's love in your pet's unconditional devotion and loyalty. Each of those responses are valid, but sometimes we forget that God is in the challenging moments of life too. And in fact, our encounters with God during those life challenges are more likely to lead to transformation and spiritual growth than our sacred experiences with God in the morning dawn or on the dock of the bay. So for today and for the next 4 Sundays, I'm going to be reflecting on our encounters with God in the difficult places of life. Next Sunday, I'll talk about God in the silence. Elijah didn't find God in the wind or the fire, but in the silence. Silence can be uncomfortable, especially when we're looking for a word from the Lord. But God is more often found in silence than in the noise of the world. The next week, I'll reflect on God in the outsider. When Jesus encountered a Canaanite woman, he was transformed. He discovered that God's grace extends to outsiders too. Who is the outsider for us? The person who belongs to the other political party, the refugee, the homeless. The last Sunday of this month, I'll share a bit about God and the transgressor when we look at 2 brave Hebrew midwives who dared to defy the Pharaoh's order to kill all the male infants of Israel. God is in our acts of civil disobedience when we resist unjust laws. And I'll wrap up the sermon series as I talk about God and the cries of the oppressed. God heard the cries of God's people and called Moses to do something about it. We will always encounter God when we open our ears to the cries of the oppressed. But today let's look at Jacob, the son of Isaac, the grandson of Abraham and the ancestor of the Jewish people. Jacob spent much of his years with a sense that there was something lacking in his life. It was like there was a hole in his spirit, and he was willing to do just about anything to fill that hole. He cheated his slow-on-the-draw brother out of his inheritance and tricked his father into extending a blessing to him that was intended for his brother. So Jacob, realizing he had worn out his welcome, left home and made a name for himself. He acquired multiple wives and children and large flocks and lots of slaves to do his bidding. But now he is returning home to face his brother, whom he had tricked out of the family inheritance and blessing. Knowing full well that this could go very badly for him, even costing him his life, he sends his family and his belongings across the river, but he stays back on the far side of the river. And as he watches his family and everything he owns cross the river, night begins to fall. And that's when he is attacked by a man. Or maybe it was an angel. Or maybe it was even God. It's hard to say because the Hebrew is unclear. I wonder if he was attacked by his own demons, his own guilt and shame for all the wealth he had acquired at the expense of others in his lifetime. At any rate, they wrestle until daybreak. It looks like an even match until the stranger strikes Jacob on the hip socket, causing it to go out of joint. But still, Jacob refuses to let his opponent go, demanding from him a blessing. And he receives that blessing, but he also receives a new name, a new identity. Instead of Jacob, now he will be called Israel, which means the one who strives with God. And that's when he realizes that it wasn't a man, nor an angel, nor even his own demons, but it was God with whom he had struggled face to face all through the night. Most of us have wrestled with God at one time or another in our lives. Some of us, myself included, seem to make a regular habit of engaging in that struggle. And almost always the struggle involves a question that begins with the word why. Why is there war, God, and suffering, and poverty, and disease? Why can't I catch a break, God? Why did I have to lose the love of my life, God? Why? Why do other people hate me because of who and how I love? Because of how I present myself? Because of the color of my skin? Because of my HIV status? And our wrestling match might take us through the night, or the next year, or an entire lifetime without receiving a satisfactory answer to our why question. And in the meantime, we struggle with each other, forcing our will on others and ending up with broken spirits and broken bodies. If God won't answer our questions the way we want, we say, if God won't fix this messed up world, then we'll just have to take matters into our own hands. But this is what Frederick Buechner had to say in his sermon on this morning's text. The stranger had simply held back until now, letting Jacob exert all his strength and almost win, so that when he was defeated, he would know that he was truly defeated. So that he would know that not all the shrewdness, will, brute force that he could muster were enough to get this. Jacob will not release his grip, only now it is a grip not of violence, but of need, like the grip of a drowning man. The darkness has faded just enough so that for the first time he can dimly see his opponent's face. And what he sees is something more terrible than the face of death. The face of love. It is vast and strong, half ruined with suffering and fierce with joy. When we wrestle with God, we may not get the answers to the questions that undo us, but we will have learned something important. And it's that all the wealth and power we may have accumulated won't change a thing. It's only when we cry uncle to life and to God that the wrestling match will end. And just as Jacob traded in his identity for a new one, we can trade in our sense of despair for hope. Our drive to always get ahead is replaced with a sense of peace. And our fear of how things might end up is changed into an acceptance of how things are right now. God welcomes a good wrestling match. For it's after we have come through those late night struggles that are marked by snot-slinging crying sessions that we will come to know God, not as our opponent, but as our ally. And we will be transformed by that knowledge. Amen.